Hey there everyone and welcome to The Game Code. I'm your host Stephanie Pelley and we're Atlantic Canada's only video game show, bringing you the latest happenings in the video game industry and featuring the local gaming scene as well. We've got a great episode lined up for you. E3 is the largest convention in the video game industry and it's always highly anticipated as it brings 3 glorious days for gamers, jam-packed with big announcements and reveals. We convene a roundtable to speculate on what some of those major announcements might be. Ian welcomes Blake Seymour, Vice President of the Dalhousie Esports Society, into the classroom for the latest edition of Mobanomics 101. Now, the Electronics Entertainment Expo, more commonly referred to as E3, is one of the largest events in the gaming industry, and for the past 18 years, E3 has typically been the place for developers, producers, and hardware manufacturers to go to show off their latest and greatest. Obviously, the gaming industry media, ourselves included, look forward to this event every year, as you can always be sure to see some big announcements and some reveals from the top console makers and game developers. So we're certainly excited to talk about our predictions for this year's event, which kicks off on June 11th. And we're joined today by Mike Daniels from Ralston Arcade, and as well as Mike Sharp from The Game Code. What I want to get started on, first of all, and this is what everyone's talking about, obviously E3 is the big stage for the top 3 game console developers, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, but no Nintendo this year. And Nintendo's already announced they're not going to be doing a major press event at E3. They're going to be instead doing some Nintendo Direct announcements and a couple of private closed events for some distributors as well. Do you think, I mean, let's be honest here, they don't really have a lot to talk about. They're not releasing new hardware. A lot of their new games have already been announced, so do you think maybe with the disappointment of the Wii U launch, they're maybe reconsidering E3 altogether? Mike?
I think a lot of people are giving Nintendo a lot of flack for not going to E3, but if E3 is the biggest show and tell presentation in the world and you have nothing to show, then you probably shouldn't show up. So there's no new Zelda, no new Metroid, no new Mario. Why show up if you don't have any of that?
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much exactly the point. Nintendo's sort of looking at it going, well, we might have some new stuff for Smash. That would be kind of cool. I'm sure there's something, there has to be something they're working on for the Wii, or the Wii U rather, but really, they don't have a whole lot to show. And the last couple of announcements really from Nintendo have been really disappointing. The biggest thing about the Wii U is now you can buy cheap Nintendo games on it. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, like as a Wii U owner, I have nothing but regret for my purchase so far. So, and Nintendo's really not doing a whole lot here to bolster any sort of confidence I have in it either, if they're not even prepared to show something at E3 or even show up for that matter.
Wii U owners exist?
I am the one. I am the one.
I also think Nintendo's been plagued in the past with the live presentations at E3 always having technical difficulties. So I'm wondering if maybe they want to move to these Nintendo Direct events where they can kind of control and like not have like major screw-ups on a live stage in front of the gaming media.
That was the best part of the Nintendo was the technical difficulties. There was always the laugh at the end. But you know what? Like Nintendo actually, their events always seemed different. It always seemed like there was something creative going on, and you would always excuse the sort of, the kind of disappointment that you felt for whatever didn't pan out. So it really just, it's kind of a blow to E3 in general. And I mean, it's a larger question I'm sure we're going to talk about in a few minutes, but what do you do? Is E3 still as relevant as it should have been, or is rather?
All right, moving on. Just talking about the other consoles, I mean, Sony's obviously already let the cat out of the bag with the PS4. Microsoft also with their recently hyped event. Do you think there's still going to be news here for both of these companies?
I think the news is going to come from the developers rather than from the consoles itself. There are still a few unanswered questions, particularly with the PlayStation, and I'm sure Xbox will have some sort of questions that will get announced at E3. So they're still needed, I guess, but it definitely doesn't seem the same as an actual announcement at E3.
Yeah, I think you're just going to see a lot of software titles announced. So Sony, you'll see probably a new Uncharted. Microsoft will do Forza, Call of Duty, Halo, and Destiny, and all that sort of thing. But I think it'll just be all software. I don't think you'll see very much about hardware because I think they're in a cat and mouse position where if they release their hardware, then the other guy will try and one-up it and that sort of thing. So I think you'll see a lot of software from the usual suspects for Sony and Microsoft.
But even some of the big software, I know they recently announced that Gran Turismo is going to have a reveal, but it's not at E3.
Yeah.
And sure, there's probably a better place for Gran Turismo, but at the same time, that is a flagship title for Sony, and they still don't even want to bring it to E3. Like, what gives with something like that?
Well, GT5 took 10 years to make, so how long away is GT6? So.
Fair enough.
All right, speaking of games, there's always surprises when it comes to games. We already know a few things. Smash Brothers for Wii U, 3DS probably going to have a bit of a limited showing. We're not probably going to see anything from Grand Theft Auto 5, obviously. But mostly there'll be some news probably about some next-gen titles. We know about like Watch Dogs, Assassin's Creed. What do you think might be some surprises here?
I don't really see anything on the horizon that seems very surprising. Watch Dogs is one of those titles that I'd love to see something bring me back to when I first saw Watch Dogs and was so impressed.
You were excited about Watch Dogs.
I was very excited about Watch Dogs, and then I saw what they brought out with the PS4 announcement, and I was very disappointed. And obviously, there's not a huge time frame for that, so I don't know. In terms of other developers, I don't really know what. I don't think there's going to be anything that's really earth-shattering. Square, I think, is really the one that maybe we should look to say, because they, of any of them, really need to step up their game.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think Square Enix has probably the biggest platform to announce something. They came off a really, really bad year this year. I think they lost over $100 million. So as much as they deny it, I think, losing $100 million to please shareholders and fans alike, I think FF7 remaster, I think that could be a big thing you could launch. I think that's pie in the sky for myself, but I mean, that's something you could do. Yeah. So.
Taking the Nintendo approach, just relaunch your old games, maybe make them a little cheaper. That'll no problem. You could sell hardware like that too.
I agree with you though. I don't think there's going to be a lot of new IP or new titles. I think there will be a lot of the same franchises that you've seen every year get new updates or new expansions, whatever it may be. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of groundbreaking, shattering type stuff at E3 this year.
Well, let's talk about Indie then. I mean, Indie's had a major presence at a lot of the major conventions this year. It was huge at PAX, and we just got through kind of discussing that. Will we see a bigger presence of Indie at E3 this year? Is this the year for it? I mean, I know they have Indiecade, which is kind of like it's not really a publicized event. It's something you can experience if you are actually at the event. But in terms of actually knowing what's going on as a fan, there's not really an outlet for that. But I mean, I'd love to see like what's new with Supergiant, what's new with like that game company. Do you think this is a year for Indie at E3?
Well, I guess one of the big questions is what do you define as indie? Because I feel like EA and Activision have bought all the indie companies. So, whether they're indie or not, I don't know. I can't remember the game title, but the guy who made Braid has a new game, so hopefully you get to see something like that. I would consider that indie. Other than that, I don't really know what else you would want to see from indie. I don't know.
Yeah, I think E3 has been like historically very indie unfriendly because it is the largest one. So it's prohibitively expensive for someone that's really trying to break in, as opposed to something like PAX or like Gamescom, any of the other sort of ones that are out there that really could, even like the Game Developers Convention, obviously much more indie friendly. I really don't think you're going to see anything other than maybe for some of the other indies that have made it big. So we know the Ouya is getting pushed back till past when E3 will start. There might be something there. The big ones, the Jonathan Blows of the industry will get their sort of time, because it seems that the bigger companies are looking to indie to sort of refresh what's going on. But in terms of anything actually exciting on the indie scene, I don't ever see it really coming from E3. It'd be one of the changes I would love to see for an E3, and I think it would make it a little bit more relevant going forward, but I don't know if this is really going to be the year that it happens.
Yeah, I agree. E3 has never really been indie friendly, and if you are an indie, I think you get a lot better exposure and a lot better press going to PAX than going to E3. So I don't really expect much from indies at E3.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to wrap things up. I want to see Nintendo show up and be like, psych, we're actually doing a press conference.
Reggie comes out.
Reggie comes out and
Wii
just...
U's for everyone.